In August 2021, a devoted Midwestern father was convicted of murdering his wife, except there was no body, no weapon, and not a single eyewitness. It sounded impossible. A crime with no corpse and hardly a shred of proof. Yet a jury found him guilty. How did love and betrayal lead to such an unbelievable verdict? Quick Crime Vault presents a true crime saga where nothing is as it seems. The case unfolds in a small town where everyone thought they knew everyone, where love turned lethal under the unlikeliest circumstances. This is a story of a family broken by secrets and a community searching for answers. Willow Creek, Iowa is the kind of place that still doesn't lock its doors at night. Population, barely 3,000. One main street, a handful of churches, and cornfields stretching to the horizon. Violent crime is almost unheard of here. So when the Miller family made headlines, the whole town was stunned. The Miller family seemed picture perfect. Daniel Miller, 42, ran a farm supply store his father started. His wife, Grace Miller, 38, was a beloved school librarian at the local high school. They had 2 children, 17-year-old Kevin and 14-year-old Lily, who were the center of their world. On Sundays, you'd see the Millers sitting together in the front pew at church, hands clasped. On Friday nights, they'd cheer at Kevin's football games and brag about Lily's artwork in the county fair. By all accounts, Daniel was a doting husband and Grace was a caring mother. They were high school sweethearts who married young and never left their hometown. To neighbors, they were the ideal couple, kind, hardworking, and still so in love even after 18 years of marriage. But behind the warm smiles and the family photos, small cracks were forming. If you look closely, you might notice Grace's smile didn't always reach her eyes in recent months. Friends say she'd been a bit quieter lately, as if something weighed on her mind. Still, no one imagined the darkness that was about to descend on this happy family. One warm summer night in June 2021, everything changed. Earlier that evening, the Millers had hosted a casual family dinner. Grace's younger sister, Lauren Harper, stopped by for dessert as she often did. Laughter floated from the backyard patio as the kids roasted marshmallows and the adults chatted about upcoming summer plans. It was a kind of ordinary, joyful night Willow Creek was used to. No one knew it would be Grace's last. Just after midnight, the Millers' farmhouse went disturbingly quiet. Kevin was away on a school trip, and Lily was fast asleep in her room. Daniel later claimed that he and Grace had gone to bed around 11 p.m., but sometime in those dark, early morning hours, something happened. Maybe there was an argument. Neighbors would later recall that the Millers' dog started barking wildly around 12:30 a.m., then fell eerily silent. A lone farmhouse light flickered on and off. And then nothing. Grace Miller vanished into the night. Daniel said he woke around 6 a.m. to find his wife missing from their bed. Her side of the sheets was cold. At first, he wasn't alarmed. According to what he told police, he assumed Grace couldn't sleep and went out for an early walk or drive. But as the minutes ticked by, dread crept in. Grace's purse was still on the kitchen counter. Her car sat in the driveway. Her phone lay on the nightstand, buzzing with unanswered texts from a colleague. Grace had nowhere to be found. By mid-morning, Grace also failed to show up at the high school library for a summer program she was running. That was completely out of character. A co-worker phoned Daniel, concerned. "Hey, is everything okay?" "Grace isn't here and she's not answering." Daniel's voice reportedly trembled as he replied that he hadn't seen her since the night before. He said they'd had a little argument, and Grace left the house on foot to cool off. Now she hadn't come home. Panic mounting, Daniel called the local sheriff's office to report his wife missing. Within hours, Willow Creek buzzed with alarm. Volunteer search parties assembled almost immediately. Neighbors, church members, even high school kids who adored Mrs. Miller fanned out to scour the area. They walked the dirt roads, combed through cornfields and ditches, calling Grace's name into the hot afternoon air. Daniel was at the forefront of these searches, or so it appeared. He trudged through the fields of the others, face drawn and sweaty, calling out Grace. Grace, as if his life depended on it. Some say he seemed dazed with worry. Others later whispered that his eyes stayed dry. That evening, When the sun went down without any sign of Grace, authorities escalated the response. The case was no longer just a missing person. It was looking more and more like foul play. That night, flashing red and blue lights bathed the Miller farmhouse in an eerie glow. Sheriff's deputies and state police swarmed the property, flashlights cutting through the darkness as they searched every inch of the house and yard. The old wooden screen door creaked as officers entered the silent home. In the kitchen, a half-eaten pie from the dinner with Lauren sat on the counter, now attracting flies. Outside, rain began to drizzle, slicking the farm's dirt driveway to mud. Investigators brought in K-9 units. A search dog sniffed and whined, circling near Grace's car in the back of Daniel's pickup truck. Deputies marked areas with evidence flags under the strobing police lights. The quiet farm was now a full-blown crime scene. Detective James Reynolds from the state police arrived to help the small local force. A 20-year veteran with salt and pepper hair, Reynolds had seen his share of crimes, but rarely in a town like this. He watched as technicians swept the farmhouse with luminol, looking for any trace of blood. "A mother of two doesn't just vanish into thin air," he muttered to a young deputy, his jaw clenched. If Grace was truly missing against her will, someone was responsible, and Detective Reynolds had a gnawing feeling the answer was closer to home than anyone dared imagine. Inside the house, investigators found unsettling signs that contradicted Daniel's story. Grace's phone and handbag were right there in the bedroom, as if she'd never intended to go anywhere for long. Her keys were hanging on the hook by the door. A pair of slippers lay strewn on the hallway floor. It looked as though Grace had left in a hurry, or been taken in one. When questioned, Daniel stuck to his account. Yes, they'd had an argument that night. It was over something silly, he claimed. Grace got upset and decided to go out for a midnight stroll to clear her head. He said he dozed off on the couch, and when he woke up at dawn, she still wasn't home. Worried, he called her sister Lauren first, assuming Grace might have gone there. Lauren hadn't seen or heard from her, he said, and that's when he contacted the police. Daniel's voice shook as he pleaded with Detective Reynolds. "Please, just find my wife. I swear I have no idea where she is. I'm terrified something happened to her." On the surface, Daniel sounded like a desperate husband. He even joined a press conference, pale and hollow-eyed, begging, "Grace, if you can hear this, please come home. We love you so much." Cameras flashed as he held his children close, a trembling arm around each. It was an emotional scene that made the local news. For a moment, the town saw Daniel as another victim in this tragedy. But as the hours turned to days, small inconsistencies in Daniel's story started to emerge. For one, Lauren Harper confirmed to police that Daniel did call her that morning, but his tone was odd. According to Lauren, Daniel's first words were, "Did anyone call you?" before he even explained that Grace was missing. Lauren found it strange, but in the chaos of worry, she didn't dwell on it. Investigators did. Then there was the house itself. Detective Reynolds noticed that the normally tidy kitchen smelled strongly of bleach. The linoleum floors gleamed too clean. In fact, Daniel admitted he had mopped the kitchen and done laundry at 5 a.m., claiming stress drove him to busy himself with chores. To Reynolds, that was a glaring red flag. Who scrubs floors the morning their wife vanishes? Officers also found a broken ceramic lamp in a trash bin in the garage. Daniel said it had shattered accidentally weeks ago, but a faint smear of what looked like dried blood on one shard told a different story. And in the living room, Reynolds' flashlight beam fell upon a family photo on the mantel. In the picture, Daniel and Grace stood beaming with their kids at last year's 4th of July parade. But the glass in the frame was cracked right across the couple's faces. That cracked family portrait seemed like an omen of a fracture behind the facade. An officer later recalled finding shards of glass under the living room rug, as if someone hurriedly tried to hide the broken pieces. Perhaps there had been a struggle in that room, a fight that no one was supposed to know about. The once happy family image was literally shattered, much like the community's image of the Millers. Neighbors began to whisper, maybe Daniel and Grace's marriage wasn't so perfect after all. Within 48 hours of Grace's disappearance, suspicion was circling around Daniel. Quietly, investigators began looking closer at the husband. They learned that in the weeks prior, Grace had confided to her best friend, Megan, that Daniel had been distant and coming home late from work more often. Grace wondered if he was hiding something. That lingering worry in Grace's eyes now took on a frightening new significance. Detective Reynolds interviewed Megan, who revealed another chilling detail. 2 nights before Grace went missing, Grace had sent Megan a text that read, "If anything ever happens to me, check on the kids." When pressed why she wrote that, Grace had only replied that Daniel was under a lot of stress lately, and she didn't want the kids left alone with him if she wasn't around. It was a bizarre message, cryptic and desperate. At the time, Megan didn't know what to make of it. Now, it seemed like Grace might have feared her own husband. As the investigation intensified, Daniel's behavior was scrutinized. Some of his actions struck everyone as odd. At a vigil held for Grace in the town square 3 days after she vanished, while others sobbed and lit candles, a few attendees noticed Daniel standing apart, eyes unfocused. When a volunteer approached to offer condolences, Daniel reportedly said in a flat tone, "It won't bring her back." Then he quickly corrected himself. "Won't bring her back home faster." Those around him exchanged uneasy glances. Why would he phrase it like that? Bring her back. Past tense. It was as if Daniel already believed Grace was dead. Police quietly obtained a warrant to search Daniel's truck. Forensic techs combed through the silver Ford pickup that Daniel drove every day. And there it was, a small reddish-brown stain on the carpet behind the driver's seat. It was so small it almost escaped notice. Tests later confirmed it was blood, and the DNA was a match to Grace. When confronted with this, Daniel stammered. First he claimed he had no idea how it got there. Then he suggested maybe Grace cut herself and it dripped some time, or perhaps it wasn't even blood at all. But the lab results didn't lie. To investigators, that tiny bloodstain in an odd spot looked a lot like the trace left from transporting a bleeding body. On the 4th day of the search, Detective Reynolds and the sheriff made a fateful decision. They'd gathered enough circumstantial evidence and were done giving Daniel the benefit of the doubt. At 6 a.m., they knocked on the Millers' front door. Daniel answered, unshaven and red-eyed. The sheriff took a deep breath and said, "Daniel, we're placing you under arrest on suspicion of the murder of Grace Miller." No, you've got it wrong." Daniel's voice cracked as cuffs clamped around his wrists. He began to sob a raw, startling sound. Lily, his daughter, stood in the hallway, hand over her mouth, eyes wide with horror as she watched her father being led away. The quiet morning air was shattered by her wail. "Daddy!" "What's happening? Where's Mom?" Daniel twisted his head around to look at his daughter. "I'm sorry," he choked out, as deputies guided him into a patrol car. Cameras flashed again, this time catching Daniel Miller in handcuffs, a sight no one in Willow Creek ever imagined seeing. The town was in shock. How could the man who seemed like the perfect husband and father now be a suspected killer? Grace's parents, who had flown in from a neighboring state, were devastated and conflicted. On one hand, they wanted to believe their son-in-law was innocent, that this was all a terrible mistake. On the other, the evidence was mounting that Daniel had done the unthinkable to their daughter. And Lauren, Grace's sister, was inconsolable. She sobbed on the shoulder of Detective Reynolds after the arrest, crying, Why would he hurt her? I don't understand." Reynolds could only pat her back awkwardly, wondering the same thing. What on earth was the motive? If Daniel truly killed Grace, why did he do it? The public was about to get an answer more shocking than anyone expected. With Daniel in custody, investigators dug relentlessly into the Miller family secrets. They went through phone records, emails, financial statements, anything that might hint at what was really going on behind closed doors. It didn't take long for a startling secret to surface. Detective Reynolds was reviewing Daniel's cell phone logs in the past few months and noticed a particular number that came up constantly at odd hours, a number that wasn't Grace's. It belonged to someone with the initials LH. His heart sank. LH. Lauren Harper, Grace's sister. Why was Daniel calling his sister-in-law so frequently, especially late at night, and during times he claimed to be working late? Reynolds dug deeper, pulling text message records and any recovered data from Daniel's phone backups. What he found made his blood run cold. Thousands of text messages between Daniel and Lauren emerged, painting a picture of a relationship that was far from innocent. Some were mundane check-ins, but others were deeply personal, even romantic. One recovered message from 2 weeks before Grace's disappearance read, "I can't stop thinking about you. Soon we'll have it all, I promise." It was sent from Daniel's phone to Lauren's in the dead of night. Another from Lauren to Daniel said, "I hate keeping secrets. I wish we could just be together." The text thread was full of professed love, hidden rendezvous, and plans that suggested the two had been entangled in a secret affair for months. Detective Reynolds felt a chill as the puzzle pieces clicked into place. This was the hidden motive. Daniel and Lauren were in love, or at least in a twisted, illicit kind of love, behind Grace's back. Grace's own sister and her husband. A betrayal almost beyond comprehension. Was Grace's disappearance the result of a deadly pact? Did Daniel eliminate his wife so he and Lauren could finally be together? The messages certainly hinted at a plan. One text from Lauren even hinted at impatience. "Have you told her? I can't stand lying to her face." Daniel's reply, "Not yet. I will. I promise. It'll be over soon." Reynolds sat back in his chair, heart pounding. If Grace discovered the affair, that confrontation could have been the spark that ignited this tragedy. Perhaps Grace did confront Daniel that fateful night after Lauren left their dinner. Perhaps she had seen a text or sensed the truth. The argument Daniel admitted to might have been far more explosive than he ever let on. Love, jealousy, betrayal. It was all here, tangled in this family's secret communications. The evidence of motive was overwhelming and heartbreaking. The investigation had uncovered a dark truth. What happened to Grace wasn't a random act of violence or a simple domestic dispute. It was a culmination of a forbidden love turned deadly. Willow Creek's picture-perfect family had been hiding an affair between siblings-in-law, and it appeared Grace paid for that secret with her life. But even with these shocking revelations, there were unanswered questions. Where was Grace's body? And was Daniel the only one involved? Or had Lauren played a part in her sister's fate? Rumors swirled. Some whispered that Lauren might have helped plan it, or that she knew more than she let on. Others couldn't believe she would betray her own flesh and blood. The case that started with no evidence now had plenty of motive, but there was more truth still to uncover. As Daniel Miller awaited trial behind bars, Detective Reynolds prepared for the next phase, proving the case in court and finding Grace, dead or alive. Little did anyone know, the most jaw-dropping twist was yet to come, to be continued